All right, welcome back, everyone, to the One of Us
Ayo.
podcast. So glad that you guys made it back. And if you're listening to this right now, just remember Jesus loves you. I just wanted to put that in there. But today we're going to be talking about relationships, shocker, but more specifically about relationships as it pertains to the church and how to maintain friendships. I got some stuff prepared for us today.
I have a good starter. Do you
Okay.
guys think that having community and having Christian relationships are two different things? Because I see them as two different things.
Wait, can you say that again?
The difference of community and like Christian relationships. I feel like a community is people that you see often. So like when I think of like going to church, fellowship, I have a community there, and I think there's a difference of that and having like a close relationship with like other Christians. So like you guys, I consider you guys like my quote unquote Christian. You're my best friends, but my Christian friends.
You know what's interesting about this, Tati, is that I would define them oppositely of how you both define them. Because you're saying my community is the people that I see at church and that I'm around, but my Christian friendships are the people that are closest to me. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, I definitely do
interesting.
opposite
Yeah, because
too.
I would have said it the opposite. I would have said my church, my like community is like the people that I'm closest to. Those are my people. And then my Christian friendships or my Christian relationships are just people that I know that I'm acquaintances with that happen to be believers that I'm around.
That are not maybe going to the same church as you.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting.
That's interesting.
Okay. I think that's a good start for sure, just to define some terms.
I would say that they are different, right? Just like Jesus, like you have people that you're around all the time that share your values, your faith, your morals, the way and the lens in which you see the world. Those people, but then there's your core group, right? Your core community, as we've defined it, of people who can like encourage you, sharpen you, who know you, who really know you, right? So I would say those things are different.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely different. Like you have your friends that are maybe you'd have over for dinner. I mean, hopefully everyone at your church that you're going to at some point you're inviting over for dinner or for game nights, or you're on that level where you're not hesitant to do so, because we're the body of Christ. I mean, we're brothers and sisters. We've been given a new we've been given a new adoption by God. And so you definitely want to get to that status, but it's not always the case. I mean, relationships are hard, especially when you're jumping into relationships that are solid as an outsider, really trying to kind of like wiggle yourself in there. You kind of assert yourself in there. If you're good at inviting yourself to things, then that's a little bit easier. But if you're not, feel a bit more reserved, like Victoria. No, I'm kidding. But feel a bit more reserved, then it's a little bit harder to really assert yourself. Speaking about church relationships, I had a question I want to ask you guys. Is not having, and sorry, Tati, I'm gonna steal this one a little bit. I hope you didn't have this written down, but I just thought it was a really good question. Is not having community at a church you call home? Like, let's say you go into this church and you're like, man, the worship's awesome. Man, the pastor really ministers to my heart. The messages are really good. I love the church overall, but then there's a certain point where you're like, man, I don't have any friends here. I'm not connecting to anyone. Is that grounds to leave the church? If not, why? If so, why? What do you guys think?
I'd say no. I think for me, what I think about a lot is, what's the, I guess, motivation for this community, right? Like, I think sometimes people, they come into a church, they love the environment, and you wonder, they're like, oh, I want a friendship, and you ask them like, well, what are you looking for in fellowship, right? And I think sometimes some people they're looking for, well, I'm just looking for a community to like support me or make me feel better or anything like that. And I think having that wrong step can lead you to not building that community that you're looking for. You know what I mean? So, like, I guess a good example, well, I guess, like, how I think about it is, like, as Christians, we're trying to sanctify ourselves more in the image of Christ, right? So, like, you think about Jesus when he came to the earth, what he came as, right? He came as a servant to serve, not to be served, right? So, like, sometimes I go to churches and I'll talk to people and I feel like they sound like they want to be served. like in their community. They're like, oh, well, I'm from yada yada and I need to be invited all the time and I need to like have the same effort placed onto me to be like a community with someone, right? And I think that foundation is really rocky because I think that's not, I guess, a godly community that you're building. It's kind of like a striving for yourself. So I think like if you kind of can figure out the foundation, your motivation for it, anywhere at any church, you can build a community. If you're saying, I can't build a community here, period,
Yeah.
I think, we need to first assess, because I do think there's some cases like you do go to a church and maybe, their theology just doesn't match, right? And you just need to go and that's fine. But I think if you're at a church, you're trying to find a community, I think first taking a look at yourself and then always asking God in prayer to open those doors of communication with other people.
Along those lines, what I would say is that I would never say a blanket opinion of if you don't have friends, leave the church or leave that specific church at least. I would say more is it might happen naturally because I'm thinking a couple of friends that I have in the church I currently attend, and they previously attended a different church while still going to my church's young adults and gatherings and different things like that. But naturally, they moved from that church to the church where they had the community. So I think it might happen naturally where if you're not finding those close relationships or if that close community in the church that you attend and you're seeking those close relationships elsewhere or at a different church or at a different community, you might slowly just gravitate towards that because you want to be around, right? You probably want to see them on Sundays. You want to be around your community a little bit more consistency. So yeah, without a strong opinion either way, I think it might just happen naturally.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I mean, even just like speaking to smaller churches, like let's say you're someone who is listening to this and you're a high school student and maybe you go to a small church with your parents and your church doesn't have a youth group because it's just a small church. There's not really a need. There's not a lot of congregates. And so, you kind of see that in some cases where some students who are believers, might call a certain church their home church because that's where mom and dad go, but they might go to a different youth group because that's where community is. And so it's kind of the same case where what you're saying, where there's some young adults that are at sister church, but they fellowship with your current church. And at some point it just happens naturally. I do think community is an important aspect. I wouldn't say it's the number one aspect for finding a home church. Community, making sure you find your people, people you connect with, and theology is a big portion of it too. I mean, if you're not reformed, but you're going to a Baptist church and like you're just arguing all the time, bumping heads with other believers because you have theological differences. Like, yeah, I would say that's a ground to maybe go congregate somewhere else. But I do love what you were saying. Don't just give up right away. Like maybe God has you here for a reason.
I guess like building on that and thinking of my own experience, what would you say in a similar situation as mine is like you went to a church for a really long time and you don't really feel like the community is like, I guess I don't want to say not Christian because I feel like there are Christians, but not encouraging other, I guess, like people or like doing anything to really have like Christ in the center.
I would say, kind of going to our definitions, Tati, and just knowing a little bit about your situation and what you experienced there, I think you neither had community and you neither had Christian friends there. So I think your situation was a little bit unique where sometimes God may be closing doors in a certain area and just opening doors in a different community. And that's something you have to walk through and be faithful to. But it's hard. It's difficult because you don't want to be like a serial church attender at different churches. Like whenever something happens, you just like go to the next church, go to the next community, because that's not good and that's not healthy. But you do have to realize if you've been there a year and a half, like what your experience was, right? About that amount of time. And, you are putting your best foot forward. Like what Juan was saying, you're not giving up, you're attempting, you're initiating, you're being the friend you want to have. But maybe that community, the culture around that community is just a little bit different than yours. And there are moments when you do need to step out of your comfort zone, right? And embrace maybe the different like environment and that subculture of that church. But there are also times when it's like, okay, maybe that's just not for me. I'm not a right fit for that. Still love them, appreciate them, honor them, but I can go forth and find a place that maybe fits what I'm looking for in my friendships as well.
Yeah, I guess going off of what Crystal's saying, I think for your situation, Tati, you did like everything you could on your part. You know what I mean? Like you're inviting people, you're talking to people, you're fostering the community, and they weren't trying to join that. You know what I mean? And I feel like kind of like what going off of what Crystal's saying is that like I think God gave you like a vision for your community back home in LA, and I think it's like you just need to be faithful to like see that out. You know what I mean? And sometimes that does call for you changing a church, attending another church, and but I think you shouldn't, like what Chris was saying, church hop at a whim. I think you should do your research before you visit your church, try to understand their theology, if that's something that aligns with what you're thinking, and then putting yourself out there again, making the right contacts to their young adults or youth group, and then just attending and seeing how it goes from there. I have a question. 'Cause I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier in the podcast, but it's because I actually do think this is like maybe a hot take, but I know it's not hot take time. But what do you guys think about people who form friendships for the wrong reasons? Like, do you think people can do that? Do you think that happens a lot in the
Or
church?
can you give us an example? Like you want to serve in the ministry, and then you're like, I gotta befriend this guy, or are you talking about like I want to date the pastor's daughter, so I gotta befriend the pastor? Like what level are we talking?
Just a bad motivation. Like, do you think that happens a lot at the church? Like, people are, seeking friendships that maybe don't really align to what God describes as true fellowship?
From what I'm getting from what you're saying is maybe like there are some people who are more geared towards hanging out with this group of people rather than maybe this group because they know that one group, maybe will hold them more accountable than the other group. And that's kind of what I'm interpreting. I don't know if that's what you mean or if that's like what you're getting at, but like in my head, what I'm thinking is like, I'll use you guys as an example. Like, let's say like I go to hang out with Arturo more because I know that if I do something that I know probably isn't right, but I also know he does it too. So we can kind of just keep, kind of pushing the envelope. Rather, if I go hang out with,
We can develop bad habits
yeah,
together.
where they maybe I like know that maybe that's not what I'm supposed to be doing, but I hang out with him because I'm like, oh, he's not going to say anything and he's still a good guy, all this stuff. Rather, I know that if I were to hang out with maybe like you, Juan, where if I were to do that, I'd be like, okay, he's definitely going to call me out and probably tell me what I'm doing isn't right, which I know is not right, but I don't want to hear that because I want to keep doing what I'm doing. So I'm going to go hang out with Arturo because it's just more of a easy and comfortable lifestyle.
I was just gonna, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the idea of just hanging around people that have conviction versus who don't. I mean, because we're all in this process of sanctification, and so there's going to be, I believe, saints in the church, wherever, whatever church you're going to. There's going to be people further along in their walk with Jesus, and so hopefully, maybe more convicted, more sensitive to the Spirit about issues of sin than other Christians. And so, making sure are around Christians who are going to challenge you and have conviction, are sensitive to the Spirit.
Yeah. I was going to say, it even goes back to that verse of like, how iron sharpens iron, of like, that's kind of like a good basis of like what you want friendships to be. You want someone that's going to sharpen you, someone that's going to encourage you and push you to grow and to be better and to do better. And to kind of answer your question, yeah, I think it's wrong to go into a friendship like with ill intentions because it's comfortable. And it's not always easy, when someone is sharpening you, but I do think it is necessary for community and for, Christian relationships.
Well, I heard your question. Here's how I heard your question. Like when you're talking about motives, I was kind of like thinking about romantic relationships. When you're pursuing a romantic, like, oh my gosh, like if you're a guy and you're like, man, I just saw this really cute girl, like I just want to get to know her. Like
Flirt to
sparks are
convert.
flying,
Missionary dating.
right? So I need to go talk to this girl. Well, not if she's a believer. Yeah, I mean, I would say like missionary dating is like you're out at a club somewhere and you're like, I'm gonna flirt to convert.
I was just
somebody
adding on because Juan said
because they're
flirt to
hot.
convert. So I was like, let's get them all out there.
No, I see where you guys are coming from. I guess like this is the reason I say the question is this is what I hear a lot from people that like I hear are looking for community, right? Is like, oh, I was going to this church or I went to this community and like no one spoke to me, no one talked to me. Like I was always inviting everyone. I was always inviting everyone for coffee, and like no one's doing anything for me. Like that's the number one thing I hear.
I mean, my best advice, like to put it frank, maybe I think men and women receive advice differently. I would say like don't be a victim. Just don't play the victim, and give it your best shot because that kind of gives you a pure conscience. If you know you're not playing the victim and you've given it your best shot, then that gives you a clear conscience for moving forward. And like, hey, this like honestly, this church didn't really work out for me, or these relationships here didn't. I tried my best. I prayed about it. The Lord might be ushering you through a different season. I also think of like Second Philippians. Esteem others higher than yourself. And it's just this like humility, and then the next portion talks about how Christ even did it. Like he's your ultimate example. Like he made himself of no reputation. He did not consider it robbery to die on the cross. If God didn't consider it robbery to be humble, then why should I consider it robbery to be humble?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at, because I think like a lot of times when friendships, because you have to think about a friendship like a pursuit of you're trying to construct something with someone, like a fellowship. So it involves two people to kind of construct it together. So I think sometimes one party's trying to really construct it and the other one says no. So like it's kind of like, what do you do in that? Like how do you kind of deal with the fallout? Like do you blame the other person for not trying to, or do you move on? And I think kind of like what you were saying, Arturo, is like sometimes you try, and if it just wasn't clicking, that's fine. They're still your brother and sister in Christ. But God will bring people that are like-minded to the vision that the Lord gave you, right? So I think you just have to be faithful in like your pursuit and fellowship. Like the Lord will grant that. You know what I mean?
Maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here by saying this, but in a lot of ways, I do think you have some ground to maybe go find a different church if you don't feel like you have community there. And obviously that's within the context of, hey, you've given it your best shot and you haven't played the victim. At least you don't think you have. But community at a church is one of the things that makes church feel like home.
Yeah.
You hear this all the time, like, oh, this is my home church, or where do you go to church? And typically it's your home church, and typically you feel fed, you feel spiritually nourished, spiritually challenged. I hope you go there because it's somewhere where you can worship the Lord, and it's somewhere you have people that you can do life with. There's been times where I've gone to church and I'm like, well, what now? Like, where do I go, or what do I do? Do I just go to my car? All right, I guess I'll just go home now. But
Yeah.
it's definitely what makes church feel like home.
And I think even in the Bible, like it says like do not forsake like gathering, right? So like referring to church as like a gathering. So although like I obviously think like you want to be fed, right? I don't think that's the sole or even maybe even the biggest reason why we go to church. I think it is to gather and to be with others, because you can, in this day and age, you can put on a sermon on your TV, or listen to it, or be fed in those ways, but it's not the same if it's not with
Or
the
read it.
proper community, and it's not the same if it's not gathering and fellowship. So I would say that's very important, and agree with you, Arturo. And like if that's not something that you're finding, you can be fed through a book, you're being fed by God through the Bible, through prayer, through so many different things. But if you don't have that community, that people to like stir you up, then I think it may be time to kind of try to find that and go seek that elsewhere.
Yeah, I hope for anyone listening, this isn't like our way of saying like be a church hopper,
No.
because we actually don't recommend that. It's just as Crystal said, it's not a very healthy thing to do. But if you're looking at if you have like a list of like major things that need to be checked off, obviously like theology, I would say worship is one, and community.
Yeah.
If you boil it down to three main things. And I've always thought about it as those Christmas lights that you put around your Christmas tree.
Yeah.
If one of those lights goes off, the entire thing doesn't turn on. So you need all those lights to be working, or else the entire array of lights is out. And in a lot of ways, I feel like this is very similar. Is if one is missing, then sometimes that causes the entire thing to be out of whack.
Yeah.
What do you think practically where you can find community in the church? Like, let's say it's like your first day at the church. Like, where are you going to try to find some community?
I could talk about like my way of going about things. It's similar to what Arturo said. Like personally, I don't jump into community immediately because, again, I want to make sure that my theology aligns, and I would hate to like get connected and then be like, actually, never mind,
Oh, that's
bye,
wise.
you know?
Yeah.
So I go to church for a couple weeks. I make sure that, you know, I don't hear anything that I disagree with theologically. And then once I feel like, okay, like this seems like a place that I can see myself staying, then I start to just get connected into ministry. So like the last church I went to young adults. And I mean, there's a few relationships that I still have, but I don't feel like I was spiritually fed by that community personally. I don't feel like there was a lot of edifying, accountability. You know, the iron sharpens iron. It was just more, hey, let's come hang out. And then once it's over, bye. But yeah, like even in the process of restarting, like right now, I'm attending a new church and I started going to a life group and then the young adult groups on Friday. So just doing that, and I'm already like getting ready to serve. And I think you can meet a lot of people. And I think that when you start to meet people, you can meet more people. Like, or you know, I already have like a big wide spectrum of people in my age and older. And I think that that's healthy, to not just stick with your age group, but have people older than you that can still teach you, and then people under you that you can help guide. I go to like a women's ministry as well. So it's just seeing what the churches offer and finding ways to get plugged in. I think it depends on the church because some churches can be a little, we don't have that many opportunities to meet people, and other churches could have a lot. But I do think that your effort matters. I think it'd be rainbows and sunshines as every church if you would go, that they're gonna all be like, oh, welcome, welcome, come hang out, come hang out. But I know that it's not the case for every church.
And I know this may be obvious, and we've talked about it at length before, but reaching out and inviting people. And something I've learned is like a lot of times when you're the new person at a new church, everyone's like, oh yeah, we should hang out sometime. And you're like, oh yeah, like we should hang out sometime. But like there's nothing like definitive about that. Like it's just like, yeah, cool. We all have good intentions, but
It's up in
life
the
gets
air.
busy,
Yeah.
right? But something that I've started to do is instead of saying, oh yeah, let me know if you ever want to hang out, that's never gonna come because people forget about that. We're so like short-sighted in our thought process of life, and that doesn't mean that they don't want to, but you know, life gets in the way. But of just going up to someone and being like, hey, like, are you free this weekend, this Saturday morning? Are you doing anything? There's this new place that I want to check out, would you want to come with me? Like being more specific.
Amen.
When wanting to hang out with people, I think is helpful in that, because I think
Grab their phone number.
write your
Just
phone
like-
number on pieces of paper, just go handing out to people.
No. We'll just
My business card. Here you
Yeah,
go. Here's
exactly.
my number. Here's my number.
Please do not give people your business
Here's my
cards.
don't give out your number like
friendship
that.
cards. Can we? Is it acceptable to say friendship cards?
Instead of
I'm
business
gonna
cards.
make one of those now.
Here is my podcast card.
Contact me. Contact my secretary to see if I'm free.
Friendship cards sound like something really fun.
That sounds like fun.
Like if you're just like handing it out to random people sitting down, you're just like, hey.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of a cool way. There are so many people when you're out and about, sometimes they're just by themselves, and you never know, honestly, who just kind of needs it. I mean, not to go too far, but I mean, even this guy, he would sit at the park and he had a sign that's like, if you're having a bad day, sit down. And this mom came over and put some headphones on and he started playing a worship song that he had made. And I think that's kind of cool. Like it was a fun, great way to, one, brighten her day, but also share the Lord with her and build a relationship. And I know we were talking about it and being silly, but I feel like the cards are kind of fun because I feel like people want community. I feel like we've been, on screens all the time, and I think people want something real.
That kind of goes to my next question, kind of changing gears here. Okay, let's say you found a church, you have community, you love the worship, you feel encouraged by the teachings, and this is your home church, and you see someone walk in and it looks like it's the very first time. What are you doing? How are you continuing to build the church? Welcome people, be intentional, foster a place for the Holy Spirit to do his thing and to share the love of Christ. What are some like practical tips that you guys can share?
Here's what I would do if this person appeared before me today. I would be like, hey, what's your name? And I'd get their name and be like, oh my gosh, like, do you want to hang out? We're all gonna go watch Dune tomorrow. That's what I would do. My like go-to is just invite people to do like the things that I'm doing with other people.
Just invite them into life with you.
Yeah, I'm like, just come, tag along. You get to know me. If we vibe, then we vibe, and then from there you can do more one-on-one stuff. But it might be intimidating at first to be like, do you want to come on a coffee date with me? I just met you 1 minute ago. They might be like, sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, just doing things with other people too, and expanding their community by inviting them into the people that I think is special and
Yeah.
can be helpful too.
Yeah.
It's like a defining character of Jesus, right? And a defining character that we like a lot that Jesus does is he was easily interruptible as a person. And I think that's like if someone new comes in and like, I think like first day, like, to Crystal's point, I think the best way to integrate anyone is letting them know that they're invited to all things, doing life. Like, we're going to go eat, we're going to go, watch a movie, we're going to, even if it's like, hey, we're just literally just gonna sit here and listen to worship. Like I think just the camaraderie of doing something together with
Breaking bread
people,
together.
like it opens it up, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes in our lives we're super structured, which is good. I'm not advocating for like a unstructured life, but I think to have the heart for new people and people looking for community to make time for them as well.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to certain people in certain seasons. Because if you're a parent with like 5 kids, you're probably not very interruptible. And your first ministry, I would argue, isn't the stranger you met at church that morning. It's probably your wife and your kids. But if you find yourself in a season where you just moved to a new town and you're looking for a home church and you found community and you don't have a lot on your plate, then yeah, if your season of life allows for it, or even just establishing priority.
Yeah.
Maybe you already have like 10 people you meet with for discipleship a week, which if you do, they should probably cut them down and just meet with Jesus more often. But let's say you already meet with all those people, and you have another 5 people lined up, and you're like, well, I really gotta establish priority, and maybe some of these people we can just do life together, like one giant barbecue, just like Crystal was saying.
Yeah.
So there is some of that. Definitely, those dynamics will come into play, establishing priority and availability. What the season of life,
Yeah.
what your season of life allows it for.
I think there are little ways though, like in all seasons, because
Mm.
absolutely, like there are some seasons in life where you're having to care for a lot of different people and have a lot of different responsibilities. But even like 10 minutes after your church service, like your kids are in
Mm.
like the kids ministry, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're fine, they're having fun, they're having a good time. Like you have 10 minutes to
Yeah.
just like look at someone and make them feel valued and special and
Mm.
seen and important. I
Mm-hmm.
think everyone can do that in small ways, and you don't have to keep rushing all the time. Because
Mm-hmm.
often, which is why we can talk about this on another podcast episode, but just like Sabbathing and like the importance of that, to kind of like regroup so we're not in this like grind culture of like we have something at 2:15, 2:30, 2:45, 3 o'clock, like
Yeah.
constantly
Mm-hmm.
doing things to like leaving your life a little bit as much as you possibly can, and that's in your control, to like leave it a little bit flexible sometimes, or extend the time period where like I know this is going to take an hour, but I'm just going to say an hour and a half in my schedule. Who knows what's going to happen, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes people just need those small moments of connection, and it can carry a long way. Or it
Yeah.
can, for example, like I'm friends with a mom, right? And she's expecting one on the way as well. And we don't get to hang out or see each other, but we have like this book club together, and I like recommended a book to her, and so we get to talk about that every once in a while, because that's something that she can do while she's home caring for her kids while her daughter naps or whatever. So there's like
Yeah.
little ways that we can still connect to people that maybe have a different availability than we do.
Okay, so yeah, obviously we've been talking a lot about church relationships. One of the first things we mentioned at the beginning, Tati had asked the difference between community and church relationships. I hope at some point for the believer, if you're established in a home church and in the community, I would hope that at some point those kind of mesh together and there is no clear distinction. Because this is actually a struggle that I had when I was in college. I would compartmentalize my friendships, and I would say these are the friendships. And I would do this in youth group too. I'd say, hey, these are the friendships that I have that are Christian friendships, and then these are my secular friendships that I have where I can cuss around and there won't be any problem. Where I can, yeah, shocker. Most of you guys witnessed that, but I did want to open up the floor to if you guys had anything to say about the importance of community, the importance of fostering community, and even your individual role. The same way we talked about church friendships.
Like when you were talking, I was just thinking about like, bad company corrupts good morals. I think like in your process of sanctification, your compartmentalizing starts to fade in the sense that you begin to just have one craving of one community.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that's the beauty of surrounding yourself, washing yourself with the word, is that you become more like him and you want more things that are good for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. I love that what you said about the craving.
Mm-hmm.
Like you start to crave the things of God. I obviously I was really craving to food. Whatever you're like, sometimes we get on this like sushi crave, and we're all
Ooh.
craving sushi. And we're like, we gotta go get sushi, and it's like we can't think about anything else but sushi, and we have to go get in our car and drive, and we go to this huge extent, get ready, make reservations. It's like, man, why don't I have that level of craving for the things of God?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love that one.
Yeah. I was going to say for, in regards to what you were talking about in community, I feel like one thing is important is, I want to bring up the Bible verse, Matthew 18:20. It says, "For where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am among them." I feel like this is important because I feel like community doesn't have to be this super big group. You don't have to have like 10, 15 people. And it says we're
Hmm.
two or more, whether if it's you and another person that like can sharpen, like I said, earlier, where can sharpen one another. You're coming together to talk about God, to pour into God and learn more about him and hold each other accountable and all these other, great characteristics. Um, I feel like don't get discouraged by that because, sometimes I know for me, sometimes like I don't feel like a I have a lot of friends, I would say, like more so maybe a few, but I see like some people that I feel like they're just friends with every single person. And I love that, but sometimes I can get discouraged myself because I'm just like, I want that.
Hmm.
But then I kind of lose sight of like the friendships that I do have. I might not have a lot, but I know that like with you guys and a few that aren't here, I like have some really amazing friendships. So maybe I'm not friends with every single person, and I do have, those Christian friendships, but I have a really strong community base. And even though it might be small, it's really great and really powerful. And so I feel like, not getting discouraged in that. If it's just one person, that's amazing. One person, because you never know. It's not going to stop there. Like
Yeah.
it's going to grow, and it might just take some time, and it might take a little effort on your part, and, being bold and getting out there and stuff. But, starting off and starting there, like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And so I'm just saying, like, don't get discouraged if it starts small, because like it says in the Bible, it's where two or more are gathered. That's a really small number.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
qu- quality over quantity. I mean, it's kind of like that question where would you rather have 100 like surface level friends or like one
Hmm.
really good friend? And most people would say, well, I'd rather have the one really good friend.
Yeah.
I think for cultivating it is just really learning how to be intentional, learning how to be bold. And I think sometimes, like for me, I can get a little comfortable in my relationships, and not comfortable as in like just slacking off, but comfortable as in the sense of like, sometimes I want to just keep it you guys. And sometimes I neglect or don't really care sometimes about making other relationships. But I know that's also not like what God would stand for. Like, your community and your friendships and your relationships are meant to grow. And so I would say, learning to be intentional, and I think, I forget who said it, was Juan or Crystal, but not easily distracted, but interruptible. Doing that and learning to be a little uncomfortable, and knowing that in the moments of uncomfort, you can grow a lot and you can grow your relationships a lot, whether it's, with God or with the people around you. So I think for that, it's just learning to get uncomfortable and learn to like getting uncomfortable, because I feel like that's where you grow the most.
I was just gonna ask, like, obviously Christian community should always be prioritized, but what is your stance on like non-Christian communities?
I have a hard take, honestly, just because, like, I think you should always be a good witness to those who are unbelievers, right? Should always love on them, should always try to, like, show them the truth. I just think, like, what is a community? Like, what is friendship? You know what I mean? Like, those are the people that you drive so much of your influence from. You hear it all the time, like, watch who you hang out with because that's who you end up being like. You know what I mean? And if you're telling yourself, oh, well, I have really good Christian friends and then I have really good secular friends, do you think some of their worldview would rub off on you? I guess from my experience, just being completely transparent, I felt like when I've had strong secular friendships, I tend to find myself like, you know, being okay or being more permissive with like certain sins
Mm.
or being more excusive with like certain conduct. You know what I mean? I think there's like a level of discernment with those communities, right? It's like, are these friends that are secular, am I going to treat them like the mission field, or they're going to be like my absolute, where all my influence derives from, you know? I think that's like a very fine line.
I think a lot of this depends on the strength and the testability of your faith. I think if you are new in your faith and maybe easily wavered, maybe it's not wise to constantly be surrounded or around or be influenced by. But I would say if like your faith is strong and you know you've been tested and you know who you are, right? You're solid in your identity of who you are. Like I think of myself, like I have people in my life, people that are my family members, people that are long-term friends, short-term friends that don't know the Lord. I love them so much and they're such valuable people in my life, but there's a maturity there where it's like I can see what you're doing, you can see what I'm doing. Like, I don't need to participate in X, Y, and Z thing that you're doing, but I still love you. I'm here for you. I think in the world, but not of it, right? And I know myself, I'm not influenced in X, Y, and Z area because I know who I am. And I have my core group, right? I have my core people that are gonna call me out and know me and see me, right? But I think you can still love on all their people. And, you know, there's a fine line between seeing people who don't know the Lord as only your mission field. I think you know, you just have to love people. Like, yeah, naturally,
Yeah.
like you want to share with them, you want to live out. You have to. That's who you are, right? I'm going to live out who
Right.
I am in my identity, right? And I'm going to be a good witness in every way possible. But I think you never know what God is going to do. Is kind of what I've seen. You never know what questions, what conversations might spark. So I don't think you should X out if you are a mature believer and you know that you're not going to be influenced. I don't think you need to X out people that don't know the Lord because God can use so many different types of people in your life and use you even if it's not now 10 years 20 years down the line to that person to just really speak into their heart during a certain season that they may be walking through. So I guess that's my take on the situation, understanding that hey, if you are easily influenced, maybe not the wisest thing, or if you feel like you need to conform to the other community or the or to that friendship, then maybe not the best, but you just have to know boundaries. I think just knowing like, hey, I love you, I'm here for you. We're different in some ways, right? We're going to engage in different things and we think about the world in a different way. But
Yeah.
this is who I am and I'm not compromising who I am for that.
I will say, like, so when I think of fellowship, the verse that always is placed on my heart is First John 1, 5 through 8 or 10. And I'm actually going to read it because I think it's like an integral role in fellowship. So, like, it says, "This is a message we have heard from him and proclaim to you, that God is light, and in him no darkness at all. If we say we have fellowship with him while we walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. And the blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from all sin. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And if we say we have not sinned, we make him a liar and his word not in us." If we say we have fellowship with someone, it involves like a certain action, which is in this case walking in the light with our brothers and sisters, right? And I want to make a clear distinction. The reason I read the whole thing is because some people think, oh, walking in the light means you're just like holy and righteous, you never sin. But like that's not the case. Like it literally says right here that like if we say you have no sin, you're deceiving yourself. A core fellowship is finding individuals that are also running, seeking for Christ, you know, his heart. Because like to kind of go towards your question, Arturo, if you have friends who are constantly running towards Christ, they're going to try to push you towards him as well. You know what I mean? And your worldview and kind of your conduct align, and you guys really build a stronger sense of fellowship. But with someone who's a non-believer, that idea of biblical fellowship can't really manifest until like they surrender their life to Jesus. You know what I mean? And that's not a bad thing. Like I think what Crystal's saying is beautiful. Every person you meet has this intrinsic value that the God of the universe laid down his life for you.
He's very jealous for them. Show them. I heard this someone say this the other day, but it's like show them the love of Christ and talk if you need to.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you don't need to say much. It's a lot of it's in your witness. It's in the way you carry yourself.
And, you know, I think absolutely naturally as you grow in your faith, you're going to be surrounded by more people that align with those with your belief system and the way you walk and the way you're pursuing God. I think that's natural to happen. And I think it's happened in all of our lives, right? As we've grown closer with God, the people that we're surrounded with, that our community, right? What we've been talking about are people that share our faith. And, it is harder. Like, I think of people in my life that I love so dearly, but, as we're trying to get closer together, right? But it's impossible to kind of meet, right? Because there's a lack of understanding of my true identity, right? But I don't think that disqualifies them from being a friend, right? Or being someone that you love and pour into and hang out with. So I just wanted to make that clarification with what I was saying. I think naturally you will surround yourself with people who love the Lord, but I don't think it's like a sweeping opinion of like, no, you cannot have friends that don't know the Lord. Because I think God obviously wants that. We're not to be in a holy huddle all the time. That's not the point of our life.
Sometimes God will strategically place you in relationship with others who are not believers.
100%.
Because, like I said, he is a jealous God. He'll pursue you. That's who he is. That's part of his nature, his character.
I feel like I always prioritize my Christian friends because, how we said earlier, like, who you surround yourself matters. We also are meant to be a light, and I feel like if we completely disregard non-believers, then how are we supposed to like spread?
But I think the important piece of that is when you are being a light in those communities that don't know Jesus, that you're to be set apart, right? It's not to like go and conform to everything that they're doing because you want to love them and you also want to be friends with them. Like, no, like you have to be who you are and you have to be set apart. But you can still love, right? You can still be a light. You can still be there.
All good stuff, guys. I just want to open it up. Any hot takes out there?
So we're going to start doing this thing where we end every podcast with a hot take and we'll just kind of talk about it. It'll be kind of fun and silly. So who has the first one for us?
I don't know. I was thinking about something. I feel like Juan got some
he has a lot of hot takes.
This is my first hot take, and it's that a hot dog is indeed a sandwich. And if anyone ever asks you, like, what can you eat for the rest of time, it'll always be a sandwich.
I guess you're right, because there's lettuce, tomato, like there's veggies.
You have 2 lettuce, right? 2 pieces of lettuce?
2 lettuce.
And you put a bunch of oranges in the middle and you take a bite. Is that a sandwich?
Sure.
Does a sandwich have to be bread?
It can be anything.
I think a sandwich, if we're being generic with that terminology, a sandwich is 2 of the same thing on the outside and one and something on the inside.
So technically you can make a sandwich with anything. But I feel like a hot dog is more like a corn dog.
No, it is not.
Wait,
a corn
wait,
dog.
wait. I need.
That's my hot take.
I need to say something. I'm a person of definition, so I just Googled what is the definition of a sandwich. And it straight up says an item of food consisting of 2 pieces of bread with meat, cheese, or other filling.
Is this Wikipedia or is this Webster's Dictionary?
This is Oxford language.
Okay.
I don't know. It's the first
I'll
thing that
accept
pops up.
that.
I only take my definitions from the Bible.
Hold on. That's the noun. And there's a verb definition, which is insert or squeeze someone or something in between 2 other people or things.
I only want to disagree with you because that's what I want to do. A hot dog is more like a corn dog.
Arturo, stop putting stuff out there.
Because, no, look, you cannot make a chili sandwich.
It's like
but you can
saying
make
like
a
a hot
dog.
dog's a cupcake. No.
What?
No, it's not. Because a corn dog, literally, you just it's wrapped, and then it's deep fried.
I have a really important question. What about pigs in a blanket?
Oh, you're making me so
That
hungry.
is bread.
Disgusting.
That is
Okay, but
bread
that's
consistency.
that's more of a
That's more of a corn dog.
That's in between a corn dog and a hot dog, but it's still not a sandwich. Like, if there's a spectrum, sandwiches would be almost in a different category.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, I have a question then. So if I get a hot dog and I chopped it in little pieces and put it in between 2 pieces of bread, is that a sandwich?
I would say yes.
Yes.
So what's the difference? Because it's still a hot dog still has the bun and then the little hot dog inside.
Are you saying that a sandwich can
Look.
only be round? That's rude.
Hey, those Wendy's patties used to be square.
Let us know your thoughts on let us know your
no
thoughts
pun
if you
intended.
think a hot dog is a sandwich, yes or no, in the comments, please. And also, while you're at it, why don't you comment one of your hot takes and maybe we'll talk about that in the next
Ooh.
episode.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram at oneofus.podcast. And just keep updated on our content. We're so excited that you guys were a part of this conversation with us. We look forward to chatting with you all next week.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.